Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to another Sabbath Insight. Of course, I am your conductor and facilitator on this journey, Chief Yuya. I'm going to get right into it. Obviously, this segment, we're going to be talking about healing not only the self, but healing others across distances. That seems to be a common theme when people come into their self-awareness or higher awareness, or they just begin their journey on self-awareness and higher awareness, that healing always seems to be the central theme, and the very first act of distant healing is not necessarily healing where you're stretching your hands outward, but it's turning yourself inward. If you look at Proverbs 42 4 and 23, it says, above all else, guard your heart, and for everything you do flows from the heart, right? So the heart is like your wellspring. And if the water is polluted inside of the well, whatever pours outward from it won't be able to refresh anyone, anyone even beyond yourself. So if you read the Torah sort of affirms the same sort of pattern. Before the priest would intercede for Israel, the priest would first have to cleanse himself. So the altar had to be sanctified, the garments had to be washed, and sins had to be acknowledged. And without that level of inner alignment, the offering was completely powerless. It was completely powerless. So the same laws you'll find across different traditions, right? It's just not central to the Torah. In Buddhist practice, we have the act of metta, or loving kindness in meditation. And when you're sending metta to other, it begins with, may I be well, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering, right? Many people who function inside of the Buddhist matrix, know that mantra, but it's only then does the circle widen, right, to family, and then to friends, and then to strangers, right, and also enemies as well. So the vibration of compassion can't be authentically projected if your heart is still fractured. Even in Chinese medicine, health is not necessarily just the absence of disease, but the smooth flow of chi energy is health, and chi is life force. So it's through the meridians of your body. When you have proper flow of chi, then you have better health. So if your chi is blocked by anger, if it's blocked by grief, if it's blocked by exhaustion, or any energy that you will then project outward, will carry that same distortion of grief, anger, energy, resentment, distortion, exhaustion, so forth and so on. So the inner channels that exist within inside one have to be cleared first. It's kind of like undamming or unblocking a river so that the water can feed the fields, right? So in Reiki and in aura healing, the same healer acts as a channel, right? So, but the difference is that if the healer's own aura is dimmed, the flow of energy, of universal energy through them, becomes very weak. That's why within Reiki, training sort of puts, I'd say, a pretty strong emphasis on self-treatment. First laying hands on your own crown, on your own heart, and on your own solar plexus before you even offer that level of touch to another person, right? So if you look across all systems, like whether it's Torah, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Chinese medicine, whether it's Reiki, there's a consistent sort of truth there, and that's the healer must heal themselves first. So self-healing is not selfish. It's a responsibility. It's if you take a cracked clay pot, it leaks, and a dirty clay pot will contaminate whatever you put into it. A weary or tired vessel sort of transmits fatigue inside of its light. So when we look at the words, I wish you well, they'll end up falling flat. It's similar to, you may be speaking to someone who's highly damaged and they'll say something like, well, I'll pray for you. And like it just falls flat because you know how fatigued, how damaged, how leaky, how contaminated they are as a vessel, because they've spoken from lips that haven't tasted any peace. They're still carrying on a breath that has knots of anxiety inside of it. So you have to begin with yourself. You got to guard your heart. You got to cleanse your temple. You have to strengthen your aura, and then you have to harmonize your chi. You have to renew your mind. You have to lay your hands on your own chest and make that declaration, be whole. It's only then does your wish begin to carry weight. That's when your words become a clear healing current that can travel across any distance. All right. I'm going to get into with you, how to do that, and, how to make sure you sort of stay in that space where your wholeness is an overflow. Your inner vessel is aligned and you're not straining anymore to heal others. Healing becomes a part of your overflow. When I first got into spiritual work, in the very, very beginning was extremely fatiguing. I would go, whether even going to like a bembe, I'm speaking about in the Isheshe circles, but even going to like a bembe and speaking to people or doing readings, performing the afa for people, or, reading Ifa, casting Opwele, as an Ifa priest. Well, maybe by then I think I had it under control. So let's go back to coming in as an Ogun priest, definitely, and performing Ebo and things like that. I would go home and knock out like maybe for a day or two. And for those who know me personally, everyone knows I don't sleep much. I don't. I try to get my rest in, but I don't. I sleep probably about half the time that the average person does. Right. So for me to knock out for a day is a big deal. But that's because I would be projecting healing to people from me as opposed to channeling it. So I'd be emptying out my own stores. And then there might have been certain things that I was dealing with as well, where I had to fight against my own blockages, so the work would be effective. But I, as the vessel, would be in rough shape afterwards, as opposed to now, I don't have to do much. People just have conversations with me, or they're just around me. They run into me on the street, and then their situations start to improve because now there's an overflow that's occurring. I'm going to teach you how to start that process. But again, you look at the sun. The sun doesn't struggle to shine. It just does what it does. A river doesn't even struggle. It doesn't work to flow. So when you're whole, wellness begins to radiate outward from you in a very powerful but natural and silent sort of way. When you look at Psalms 23:5, it says, my cup runneth over, right? So that's a sign of a divine alignment, not necessarily an emptiness. It's not a survival. You're not locked into that root chakra survival mode, but there's an overflow that nourishes others, right? When you look in Torah, the Kohen, or the priests, once they were purified, they were able to then extend blessings to the entire community. So that priest's inner alignment became their covering. So that priest's wellness became like a collective medicine for the entire community. Even in Congo cosmology, and in Congo thought, each person carries what they call the umfumu. And the infumu is a vital force similar to chi. But infumu, it radiates down from the belly and inside of the heart and then inside of the head, right? And when a person is balanced, that's a force that shines outward from that person like a light. So if you'll find in the Congo cosmogram, there is this circle with the cross in it, right? And which some may remember is the original logo for Sadulu House, the school that we have, the online school. You can always go there and take classes and stuff. But SaduluHouse.com, shameless plug. But some of you may remember that the original, especially when we had Sadulu House, there was a time when Sadulu House was all in person. And, eventually later it became an online thing. But the original material that I would hand to the parents, it had that was our logo. It had it right on the cover page and everything like that. Good times. But that Congo cosmogram, it's a circle with a cross. And that teaches you that there's a move between worlds that goes from dawn to dusk, from birth to death, from the visible to the invisible. So if you're centered at the crossroads, the person who's there carries a balance between both worlds. So that person's presence is healing, because they stand as a bridge. In that system, the elders say when your Kalunga, the Kalunga is another kind of life force. When your Kalunga is in harmony, then others are drawn into that field without words. So you don't need to do any healing because you are the healing. Uh, in similar instance, when you look in Buddhism, it's the same reason that a monk will sit in stillness, and even though they're sitting in stillness, they still have the ability to transform an entire space, because their aura is filled with what we call metta or compassion, and it's cultivated inwardly until it starts to spill outwardly. So, and people will feel it in their nervous system. They'll feel it in their breath. And the presence of that monk or that priest becomes something that alone, just the presence, transmits healing. And again, the Chinese medicine we were speaking about earlier, or traditional Chinese medicine, it's described as the radiance of Shin. And Shin is an important one. It's the spirit of the heart, Shen. So when Qi flows smoothly, your Shin begins to shine. And it can be seen in the brightness of the eyes, right? The vitality of the skin, the calmness of one's voice. So you can't necessarily fake Shin. I guess in Hollywood, if you wanted to display someone who was enlightened, I guess they could use CGI and makeup and things like that. But it radiates naturally from inner harmony. So there's a sharp connection, and there's sort of a resonance that I would say is worth paying attention to and drawing out. You have Shin in Chinese thought and traditional Chinese medicine. Shin is the spirit or the the consciousness that's animating, that resides inside of the heart. And it governs, like I said, mental clarity, vitality, and emotional balance, right? And then so when Qi is smooth and blood nourishes the heart, the Shin, it begins to shine, right? And it becomes visible in the head as a voice. It becomes visible in the eyes, and it's felt in the aura. Then you have Shin again in your Hebraic lettering. Shin gives you the sound of sh when it has a accent dot to the right, right over the far right leg. It becomes Shin. Without that, it's s. So with the accent dot, it's the sh sound, and without it, it's the s sound. But the name of the letter is Shin. And Shin is considered to be the breath of fire, right? So Shin is linked with Esh. Esh means fire, and within divine presence. So it's the letter that you often find on the headpiece of the high priest. You often will find that Shin marking, because it represents the consuming, yet purifying flame of Elohim. So mystically, Shin has three branches. If you look at the letter, it has kind of goes in a curve. This is where we would insert some graphics post one day. I'll get some editing, but it'll have a curve and then, the three lines or branches. And those symbolize the threefold essence of divine fire, which is revelation, transformation, and renewal, right? So when you look at how Shin and Shin can resonate with each other, they're both connected to the heart fire principle. Okay. So in Chinese thought, Shin dwells in the heart and it radiates outward as vitality, and it radiates as consciousness. And the Hebraic, we could even say mysticism, Shin represents the fire of the heart or the spark of the divine essence within a person. So both of them emphasize a light that shines forward. Shin, Shen, has brightness in the eyes, whereas Shin has the tongue of flame in the spirit. But both of them represent the spark that bridges heaven and earth, right? So Shin, Shen, links the physical body to the spiritual mind, and Shin, Shin, which is the Hebraic, links the human vessel to the divine name. Where we see in like the word Shaddai. Shaddai was placed on mezuzot, with Shin representing the indwelling presence of Elohim when you see the word Shaddai. So there's sort of a synthesis there. We could say that the Chinese Shin is the radiant spirit within woman and man, and it's expressed through vitality, and it's expressed through consciousness. And the Hebraic Shin is the fiery imprint of the creator within the soul. And that's expressed through the word and expressed through flame, right? So together, they both sort of give a testimony that when the heart is aligned, fire and spirit radiate outward from it as a healing light. So your healed, I would say your healed Chinese Shin becomes your living Hebraic Shin. When the flame of Elohim is visible in your presence, is visible in your words, is visible in your aura. And I mentioned earlier, like the sciences of Reiki, in Reiki and in aura healing, a balanced feel, it entertains and it entrains others around it. Just as if you have a tuning fork, right? Which I do. I don't have it at arm's reach, but a tuning fork causes another nearby to vibrate in harmony. So when your energy field brings others into resonance without any effort, or even without touch, or like the laying on of hands, your wholeness becomes a quiet medicine. You see, which personally I feel that's the best medicine. When you come into a space, you walk into a room and you sort of have an overflow effect. That's why you could have a person who walks into a room, and the room could be chaotic, right? But when they walk into the room, all of a sudden silence falls. You can have a calm parent that can place a hand on a child, and then all of a sudden that child's breathing steadies. Some of you may have experienced this. I bet you have. When you sit with a true elder, emphasis on L, but when you sit with a true elder, it feels like rest. You ever wonder why babies always fall asleep on grandma? And grandma could actually be doing something. She could be moving and doing something, and they tend to always want to hold on to her, grab onto her skirt, lay on her lap, lay in her bed, but they always fall asleep. That's why you always, when it's time to go home, it's like you got to get them up off of grandma, because sitting with a truly healed elder, it feels like rest. Now, that's the overflow that I'm speaking about. It's the living proof that when you heal yourself, your wholeness spills over out into the world. So healing is not just something you do. It becomes something that you are. Your aura, your Chinese Shin, your mfumu, your breath, they all radiate wellness as a natural overflow, of your own healing. And I'm saying Chinese Shin just to differentiate between the Hebraic Shin, so Shin is not Chinese, per se. So when you're extending that healed power outwards, once your vessel is whole, once your cup is overflowing, you can begin to now extend that healing power beyond yourself. Okay? You extend it beyond yourself. So healing now no longer requires any proximity. It moves across distances in the same way that light crosses space, the same way that you have sound waves that travel throughout the air, the way that you can have a thought, and you can have a thought that leaps from heart to heart. You can inspire people with a thought, and it goes to this person, this heart to that heart, right? There's a clear image that you read when you read in some of the Helios Biblios writings. There was a centurion that came to Yahushua, and he said, Master, or Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. That's in the 7th chapter of Luke. In fact, I think that's Luke 7:7. I always pay attention to numbers that line up. It's for a reason. So Yahushua kind of like was surprised at that, because it says he marveled at this person's faith. That healing could be released without touch, without someone's physical presence, through word, through meditation by itself. So that's the essence of distance healing. It's healed presence projected outward. Again, if we look at the Congo, you have the Dekinga. And the Dekinga cosmogram, that's the circle with the cross I was speaking about earlier. It shows the 4 moments of the sun, right? And it shows dawn, it shows noon, it shows sunset, and then it shows midnight. So that's life moving in cycles between the visible and the invisible worlds. So if you're centered at the Kalunga is the line or the horizon that sort of separates the worlds. You learn to transmit forces across each realm. So a person, who has a balanced Mfumu, which is the life force. Again, you have the Kalunga, which is that balancing line, which is a force. Then you have the Mfumu, which is your life force. And the Kinka, the Kinga, is the actual cosmogram. It's the image. You can look it up, But a person's balanced Mfumu or life force crosses from the seen to the unseen, and it touches someone miles away as easily as someone that's sitting right next to them. So to wish someone well from the center or from the Kalunga is to stand at the cosmic horizon, and you then send healing that doesn't even know distance. It doesn't recognize distance. It doesn't recognize time or space. You have the same sort of transmission in Buddhist culture. In Buddhism, the principle lives within the metta bhavana and the cultivation of loving kindness. After grounding in self-compassion, the the mediator then radiates love outwards. First, you radiate your love to a friend, then you radiate your love to a stranger, then to an enemy, and finally to all beings everywhere. That is distance healing in its purest form. It's seated in one place, or you're seated in one place, but you're sending compassion across space and time. And you're trusting that the intention itself is the vehicle of your healing. That's why sometimes when people say things like, I'm sending you positive energy, prayers up, I'm praying for you, you kind of know, like, whatever. Because you can feel the intention from the rip. Like, you don't really truly intend wholeness and wellness, because that is the vehicle, that is the car. So compassion is a passenger, and your car, your vehicle is the intent. If the intent is weak, the compassion doesn't make it. If the intent is strong, it's a well-tuned machine, then your love and your compassion, or your metta bhavana, it reaches where it's supposed to. And your traditional Chinese medicine, once your qi is harmonized, your Shin, or your spirit light, it begins to radiate. So Shin is not limited by the skin. It projects beyond the body. It forms an aura. So when you're strong, your Shin can influence the qi of another person, even at a distance. And that's why you'll hear Qigong masters speak of sending qi. They're not speaking metaphorically, though it sounds poetic. They mean literally an extension of the balanced energy field into another person. So when you're looking at things like Reiki, and you're looking at things like aura healing, I would say current or contemporary energy healing systems, they echo sort of the same truth. And in Reiki, distance symbols allow practitioners to project universal life force. They have these different symbols that they pull from, and it allows them to project the universal life force across miles, right? And then in aura healing, you have people who practice that, and they visualize another person's field, right? And they're repairing tears, like kinks and holes and tears inside of another person's auric field, and they're replenishing it with light without needing to be in the same room. There's an important key to that, though. Only a healed vessel transmits clearly. If your own aura is clouded, what you send will then be clouded. If your own chi is stagnant, what you project will only be heavy. That's why distance healing is not a technique that you look at as a technique first. Distance healing is a being first. It's a way of being first. So who you are matters more than what you do. And I know that's probably very contrary to modern day digital guruism, where a lot of times it's people don't look for proof. Somebody could get up and say something, and they may not have any testimonies. Like, if you were to look me up, there are people who will tell you, he has helped me. He has done this for me. He has done that for me. Or being a part of his community has changed me in this way, or grounded me in this way. Right. So what I do is more important than that's why I don't introduce myself to people and say, hey, I'm Chief Yuya. I'm Yuya. I don't say I'm Minister Yuya. I'm an ordained minister. I've never, ever introduced myself as Minister Yuya. I'm Yuya. I'm an initiated priest of Ogun, and I'm also an initiated priest of Ifa. I have never introduced myself as Baba Yuya. I introduce myself as Yuya. If I'm speaking to a child, it's different, right? Because it's just a cultural thing. You're not going to call me by my first name. But I let the people determine what I am based on what I do. Like I've said before, I never started calling myself chief. I am a chief. I'm initiated in 2 different places, but I never told people that. People started calling me chief, and it made more sense because it was like no one could pronounce my name. I got tired of being called Yo-Yo and Yayu and Yaya. Well, Yaya is a cool name though, so I take Yaya. But yeah, everything else but my actual freaking name. So it was like, and even Haru, like, when people knew me as Brother Haru, and for a while people knew me as Baba Haru, right? But how did I go from Brother Haru to Baba Haru, right? And these are people who never met my children. So they didn't know I was actually a Baba, or to know that I was actually a Baba Lao. They didn't know anything about that. It's always Brother Haru, Brother Haru. And then eventually Baba Haru, because they saw the work that I did in the community. They saw the work that I did with the children, with the youth, with the elders. So I guess we'll call him Baba Haru, right? And then that eventually became Chief Yuya, right? So what you do is more important than what you are. Or rather, excuse me, who you are, like the role you actually play becomes the most important, the most important thing beyond, what you may think you're doing. Distance healing is not about force. It's about a resonance. You can't force your way into the title of healer. To be an authentic healer. When you stand in wholeness, your vibration then calls others back to wholeness. You see, you give other people the courage and the inspiration to be whole, but it's like a tuning fork. When you hit that note, you set another into vibration as well. So your healed field begins to entrain another's healed field. Your words, or for some of your prayers, if you pray, your visualizations, they become a bridge. So distance is not an obstacle when you're aligned. I want you to really understand that point. The healed heart becomes a transmitter. The healed mind is an antenna, and your healed aura is a beacon, and when you say, I wish you well, heaven and earth now conspire to carry that wellness, you know, across every divide that you can imagine, because there's more than time and space. Like we have more dimensions than that, right? It's just something I want you to keep in mind. Now, like I said, healing begins inward and then it radiates outward. So how do we practice that in flow? I'm going to give you some pathways that are drawn from elders and ancestors to sort of help you refine your daily work. First thing, breath. From the Torah and just energy medicine, place your hand on your heart, right? I'm going to walk you through it. I'm not going to do the meditation with you now. So you can please go back, write your notes, draw your diagrams, whatever it is that you do, copy and paste, whatever from the transcript, whatever you got to do to, write your steps, right? But I'm going to stop and pause in between because, it's just easier for me as I'm speaking, because things come to me sometimes as I'm teaching and speaking. But place your hands on your heart, inhale with the silent thought of the divine name, the breath of life itself. Now, and what I mean by that, you don't have to inhale and think Allah. Your inhale is the silent divine name. That is the divine name. So you inhale with the silent breath of that divine name. Then you exhale the phrase, be well, and first you exhale that be well over yourself. Then you exhale it over another person. So now each breath becomes a carrier wave, and it's sending healing intention across distance. Elohim breathed into man the breath of life and he became a living soul. That's Genesis 2:7. So breath itself is the first medicine, So when that breath is aligned with intention, it becomes a healing wind, right? So you have some visualizations you could do. If you close your eyes and imagine the person that you want to wish well, see them surrounded by light. They're joyful, they're whole, they're strong. In your Congo tradition, you would picture them standing upright at the Dekinga, and they're at the Dekinga horizon, and they're balanced between worlds, and they're glowing with Fumu. Okay. Now, if you're approaching it from a Reiki context, you can trace the distant healing symbol in your mind, right? And then you send the light from there. So what you hold in your inner eye, it imprints itself on the unseen world. So now, if we're looking at sort of a Buddhist expansion of loving kindness, you start with yourself. Say, may I be well. May I be whole. And then you expand that to someone who you love. Then expand it to someone that you're neutral about. Then expand it to someone that you struggle with. We all have someone that we struggle with. And, in your own quiet meditation, be honest. I can tell you I have two people that I struggle with in life. I haven't spoken to either one of them in years, many, many, many years. But whenever I have a thought of them, it's not a pleasant thought. Whenever I have a thought of them, it's like so that's a struggle. That's an enemy within my mind, even though it's been, one of them I haven't even seen in 20 something years, but that is still there, right? That struggle. So we all have that. So I'm just giving you an example of what an enemy or a struggle may look like. So finally, once you've gotten through those, someone you love, someone you're neutral with, and someone you struggle, then finally you want to radiate, may all beings be well. So now you're stretching your aura when you're doing that. You're teaching your spirit to reach across the invisible boundaries. Then you have chi circulation, like qigong, right? You can sit or you can stand, whatever you feel comfortable with, and you breathe into your belly, right? And you'll start to feel your chi rising, and it rises up the spine, back of your spine, and down the front of your body in a circle. This is a microcosmic orbit, if you will. And once you feel that current flowing, imagine sending that chi outward, right? From the palms of your hands, or from your heart towards the one that you want to bless. Now, by circulating your own chi, you ensure that you're not depleting yourself. You're sharing from the overflow. Against this, something I had to learn over. I'm giving you shortcuts. Well, this is something that I had to learn like 30 years ago. Because I remember one time coming back from a ritual, myself and my consort. She's Oshun priestess, and we were so spent. because we didn't know how to regulate chi. We didn't know how to create microorbits of chi, so we wouldn't deplete. And I remember her falling asleep on the kitchen floor. I'd never forget that night. You know, I went upstairs for something, and my kitchen floor is like, it's hard tile. It's not like, it's not carpet or anything like that. And I came down, I'm like, did she pass out? You know, still had her whites on and everything, and head near the garbage can at that, and just was out, you know. And yeah, I had to bring her upstairs to the bedroom, you know, but just didn't have it. Didn't even, and mind you, the living room is next door to my kitchen, so it's like it's just maybe a 10-foot walk from there to there. Couldn't even make it to the sofa, you know, just on the floor, you know. So you want to make sure that you're sharing from your overflow and not from your core reserves. So you want to create that microcosmic sort of orbit. Then you have whether it's Torah and also within ANU, you know, write the name of the person you're wishing well and surround it with words, you know, of blessing, or you can write that name and surround it with Psalms, you know, or one Psalm verse, right? And then you can place that near water or place it under a candle, and you allow the elements to carry the vibration. Now, I know some people listening, especially you, Bible people, not scriptural people. There's a difference between scripture, Torah, and Bible. Be like, wait, that sounds like some voodoo. It's not voodoo. Chill out. It's visualization. So you're aligning your timing with sacred rhythms, you know, when you're carrying vibrations. You want to build up your chi, your aura. You need to guard the Sabbath for rest and relief. Stop playing with the Sabbath, man. Guard the Sabbath. The dawning is for new beginnings. There's a rhythm there. Your full moon is for illumination. You know, so when your affirmations or your prayers are synchronized with cosmic cycles, you know, it travels further. It's kind of like you're in a boat and your sail catches a wind. You know, you're moving with the wind currents. Now, your self maintenance is important. You know, you got to remember, you can't send what you don't carry. You know, so make these things a daily practice for yourself as well. You know, whether that's your journal. Some people journal for emotional release. Forgiveness rituals for clearing out bitterness is extremely important. Fast, rest, meditation to cleanse the vessel, regular aura brushing, or what we call chi shaking to clear stagnant energy. Um, a healer who tends to their own temple will never run dry. They'll never ever run dry. You know, that's an important thing to remember. Your self-healing is key. And again, it's not selfish because you're doing it for the benefit of others. So I would tell you, you know, one thing you could do is, you know, to prepare your vessel for cleansing, find a quiet place. Again, sit, or you can stand upright. Um, Sit by natural light if you're able to. If not, you could light a candle. But that represents the divine fire, that Hebraic Shen, or the flame that we speak about in the Congo of the Mfumu, or even in Buddhism, you have what's called the torch of awareness. And you breathe slowly until your body like starts to soften. And you want to start to imagine your skin as getting porous, you know, and it starts to release tension out of its pores. And you have to confess, name the disturbance, you know, speak out loud. This sickness does not belong to me. This anger, this resentment, I now release. You know, the naming is so important. You know, in Torah, you have vidua, or vidru. It's the confession. It acknowledges that something has to be purged. In your Buddhist format, awareness names the poison so that it can be transformed. Naming is so important because it breaks the secret hold that something would have on you. That's why a lot of times people probably notice when they work with me, I'm sort of a stickler for being explicit. I don't really work in the gray areas much. I don't work with ambiguity. If I ask someone, hey, what's going on with you? What's wrong? I got some stuff going on, Chief, but you already know what's going on with me. You're psychic. Don't play that game with me. I don't have time for that. Be explicit, because you can't transform your poison until you're honest about it, until you're willing to name it. And a lot of people are afraid to do that because of their own pride, because of their own ego, because of their own arrogance, because of their own fear of vulnerability. So they're being oppressed and ruled over by these secret things instead of just saying it out loud. Or they learn from silly churchgoers like, well, I don't want to speak that into existence. It's already there, fool. It's there. So you got to pull it out of its hiding place by naming it, just like you would call a child. And, you might say children, everybody ignores you till you say the actual child's name, and then it comes out into the light. So you got to extract. One of the things you want to do is place your right hand on the area of discomfort. If it's a sickness, you would put it on the body part. If it's anger, you put your hand on your heart. Or you could put it on your solar plexus as well. You inhale deeply. And as you exhale, imagine that there's a dark smoke or stagnant chi or stagnant energy that's leaving that place. So with each breath, you want to take your left hand and you want to sweep your hand outward as if you're pulling threads of anger or pulling threads of sickness out of you from your body and then casting them onto the ground. The ground, the earth neutralizes everything. If you're visualizing the earth, the Kalunga in Congo thought, that great ocean of spirit, you want to visualize it absorbing and neutralizing that energy that you're pulling out of you in that ritual. Then you want to participate in an infusion that's replacing it with light. So once you feel lighter, you place both of your hands over your heart and you inhale. Again, that's the silent name of Elohim, is your inhale, and you're exhaling light, pure light into the body. And you're seeing the area that was once occupied by sickness or occupied by anger. You're filling it with a golden fire. So in your Chinese medicine, we call it the replenishing of qi. And Reiki, it's called the channeling of universal energy. And in Torah, it's the invoking of the Ruach, the breath of Elohim, the Ruach HaKodesh, right? So now, once you do these things, you want to seal it with a blessing. That's called integration. After you've done infusion, you've now done integration. So you speak out loud. It's a sealing phrase. I am whole. I am well. I am free. And you imagine a shield of light surrounding your body. So now your aura is now repaired. Bow your head when you do that in gratitude. And you acknowledge that self-healing is a divine partnership. Now, once you've done that, you now have to move on to the embodiment phase. That's where you act in alignment. If you release sickness, drink good water, clean water, or eat nourishing food afterwards. And in doing that, you're affirming health. If you released anger or you released resentment, take one step of forgiveness. Write a letter, speak a blessing, or at least refuse to rehearse that grievance in your mind. Um, that's an important one. A lot of times I work with people, things are great, things are amazing. And while they're open and vulnerable and sensitive to be like, you can see the shoulders drop, like, but you know what? Nope, stop, drop, shut up. Now, I nope, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like, you're in this space, we're gonna stay here, but only brings you to hell. I feel good, but, and now you want to fall down into the lower chakras. No. Self-healing is not about, it's not, or I'd say it's not just about removing what's broken. It's about replacing and seeing with light so the wound doesn't return. You know, when you master that inwardly, the same process can be projected outwardly in distance healing, or when you're working with another person. You know, distance healing is it's not a performance. You know, it's an overflow that's structured into a practice. So when you breathe with intention, when you visualize with clarity, when you align with the cycles and you clean your own heart, every word, you know, and you do these things daily. It's not a one-time thing. When you do it daily, every word of like, I wish you well becomes more than a sentiment. It becomes a medicine that's now carried across the ruach or carried across the wind, you know? So it's a daily practice that I want you all to gather yourself into. And there are some things that can strengthen your chi, can brighten your aura, and expand your healing presence, like the foods. You know, I would say be careful of your brown rice, even your quinoa, these things that are acid forming. You want to lean more towards like your millet, your teff, your fonio, you know, these sort of ancient grains you find often throughout Kibalan. They're very good for chi grounding. Amaranth, you know, which is really good. It's also very rich in minerals as well. Uh, as far as like your leafy greens, your spinach and your kale, which I know a lot of us will use often, they can be starch binders. So when you're working on healing your chi and your expansion, you want to focus on like your dandelion greens, which are great for blood cleansing, and they're abundant in the Kibalan as well. You're going to start noticing a pattern here. Moringa, also abundant in the Kibalan, but it's highly mineralized. Callaloo, which we call the amaranth leaves, callaloo is critical. When you're looking at your root vegetables, I would say, you know, you might need to fast from your beets, your carrots, your sweet potatoes, but put more of a focus on like your burdock root. Again, another blood purifier, helps the flow. Your yacon root, um, which is still a sweet too anyway, but they're really good for digestion. Then you have your taro, or what we call dashin, you know, in the islands, or cocoyam. You could also use those as well for your root grounding. When you're looking at like your nuts and seeds, um, pull back a little bit from your sunflowers and your almonds, and you want to focus more on sesame street seeds, especially black sesame seeds. Those strengthen your bones, but they also cultivate your yin energy in a really good way. Your Brazil nuts as well, which are great for psyllium anyway. They're a really good psyllium source. Um, walnuts. Walnuts are excellent for aura strengthening, but you know they also have been proven to be a brain food as well. You know, walnuts are really good for brain activity. If you're looking at your fruits, you want to, again, just during the time that you're aura strengthening, maybe stay away from like your berries, strawberries, blueberries, even pomegranate to a degree. Well, pomegranate it can be, you can use it in and out, but soursop is the king slash queen, what we also call graviola. But soursop is extremely high vibrational, extremely. It's also an immune booster as well. So it has some other stuff going on with it. Mango is another one. Mango is very high in carotenoids, and it brightens the aura. Mango. Papaya is it supports also cleansing, but it's a digestive aid anyway. Cherries, very good because they strengthen the blood. Your figs, your dates, they are very grounding as well as energizing, but they're very grounding. Burro bananas or seeded bananas. Don't eat the Cavendish ones. We don't want the Cavendish ones, but the burro bananas are very potassium rich anyway. Um, so these are things that would sort of strengthen the aura, strengthen and help with your chi. Like I said, the fonio, the teff, the millet, the amaranth, the dandelion, callaloo, moringa, taro, burdock root, yacon, hemp seed, rather, sesame seeds, Brazil nut, walnut, soursop, mango, papaya, cherries, figs, dates, burro bananas. If you're looking at your herbs, again, burdock root is excellent because it moves stagnant chi in the body. Sarsaparilla root is extremely good as well because sarsaparilla, it's iron rich, first of all, if you have iron deficiencies, but it strengthens the life force. It strengthens ashe and chi and moyu. Elderberry, elderflower, it protects the aura, but it's also an immune shield as well. Then you have Damiana. Damiana is really good because it calms the spirit and it uplifts the mood, and it's good for as a mind clearer. Then you have like blue vervain. Blue vervain, it releases stress, it balances out the nervous system, and it's a spiritual fortifier. You have nettle leaf. Nettle leaf is a blood builder. It strengthens your vital force as well. Lemongrass is also excellent because it opens up the breath. Lemongrass also, it lightens your spirit and it smells good. It's a very good aromatic sort of aura cleanser. If you look at Revelations 22:2, the leaves of the tree were given for the healing of the nations. You have to sort of use these things. Oils, you know, um, oils are really good for your external aura work. Frankincense. Frankincense clears energy fields. It elevates your affirmations. Myrrh restores it's grounding and it restores strength. Your lavender calms anger, but it also harmonizes your emotions. Rosemary is excellent for those of you who may have mental fogs, but it also strengthens the memory and it strengthens the aura. Then you have like your coconut oil, your olive oil. Those are excellent bases for anointing with, for sealing an intention, for nourishing the body, protecting the aura. Um, Olive oil in particular, it's ancient Mediterranean oil, but as you see in Torah, it's been long used for anointing. It softens, it seals, and it balances. Then you have sesame oil, in particular, black sesame oil. Sesame oil strengthens the bones and it strengthens essence, which is the yin. It fortifies the aura field as well. Hemp seed oil. Hemp seed oil is just good because it's rich in essential fatty acids, but it nourishes your nervous system and it supports energy flow. Then you have like avocado oil, right? Avocado enhances vitality and the glow of the aura. Your castor oil is really good because it's purgative and it's protective. It clears stagnations. especially when you use it as rubs or even, castor oil compress. So just as like your foods work on the the inner temple, the oils protect and seal the outer temple. So when used consciously, whether you're using them for massage, for anointing, for aura brushing, those different oils, they begin to strengthen your life force. They begin to guard your energetic field, and they anchor your intention in the physical body, right? So these are things you should be like doing every single day for the maintenance of your aura and chi, your pranayama, or your chi breathing, that oxygenates the spirit, and it cleanses stagnant energy. Your Tai Chi movements, or your Qi Gong, which circulate Qi, repair the aura. Meditation, with visualization, where you're imagining that golden light filling and expanding beyond the skin. Salt baths to draw out the heaviness, and to reset your aura. Drumming, chanting, these things, they're vibration therapy. And vibration therapy restores rhythm to the spirit. Your Sabbath rest, that's the Torah's rhythm of release, where every strong, or every week, but every strong, you're renewing your chi. You got to always remember that we're releasing medicine, but the medicine has to be brewed inside of you. You can't heal at a distance when you refuse to heal at home first. You can't project any levels of wellness if your own temple is decaying. That's why the work always is going to begin with self-healing, cleansing the heart, renewing the spirit, restoring the flow of life inside of you. And once aligned, then you'll start to overflow, and your presence becomes a sanctuary. Your words become like a seed, and your breath becomes the wind that carries restoration across every divide. And I'm not just speaking theory, it's living law that's written in multiple traditions. Like I said, you got the Congo elder standing at the crossroads, you got the Buddhists radiating compassion outward, you have that Qigong master who is circulating a micro orbit of Qi, and then you have the Torah priest who is cleaning the altar before blessing the people. So they all kind of tell you the same truth, that the healed vessel transmits healing without limits. So when you say like, I wish you well, it's not necessarily a farewell, if you will. It's a decree, because you've now learned to work with a vibration that leaps across space. A vibration that binds heaven and earth to confirm what has been spoken, right? So when Yahweh Shai said in the book of Luke, like, physician, heal thyself, I think that's 4:23. And in Matthew 18:18, where he said, what you loose on earth will also be loosed in heaven, the law of correspondence, the Hermetic law he was sharing. So when you loose the blessing of wellness from a healed heart, heaven, or Orun, or Anu, or Shemayim carries it across distance, and it dissolves the different boundaries, making something near that seems to be extremely far. That's the hidden fire, if you will, of distant healing. That's the true power of self healing. To heal yourself is to tend to your temple with the foods, with the herbs, with the oils, and the practices that begin to strengthen your life force. When your chi begins to freely flow, when your aura is shining bright, and your breath becomes blessing, your words become fire, and your presence becomes medicine. There's no getting around that, you know. So I would just say again, with, you know, sort of eternal degree, I wish you well, you see. So I want to thank you for this time that you have decided to share with me, and the message that the Creator has provided for me to share with you. And willfully, you will take this now, expand your practices with it, and try it out. Send healing towards someone who you know who needs it, you know, which is probably every single person that you know, because the world is like a roller derby. It's like bumper cars. You know, we incur a lot of damage to the spirit being here, or sometimes we're surrounded by disruptors. Disruptors are the seeds of the serpent, who there's enmity between the seeds of Eve or Hawa and the seeds of the serpent. You know, it's Sabbath today. How many people have messaged you and texted you and tried to call you? Those are disruptors. They're always seeking to undo and disrupt the work of the Most High. You know, and even though you may dodge them, the very thought of them sometimes leaves little knocks and little chips inside of your auric field, because you're constantly shaking off, you know, those who would seek to disrupt, those who all of a sudden, I have a client like that. I work with him and his son. I tell him all the time, I don't work Sabbath. I even use the language. I tell him Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, you cannot catch me. He and his son do the exact same thing. It's almost like every Sabbath dawning, they will call me at like 7:30, 8 a.m. Or they'll send me a text about something that I was working with them with. And of course, I ignore them. But even in seeing it or having to ignore the phone call, it leaves a little scratch on the aura that has to now be cleansed. I'll get into that at another time. You know, the experiences that we sometimes have with the seeds of Kawa. And sometimes the seeds of the serpent. Sometimes we don't recognize them for what they really are, you know. But anything that's seeking to cause distraction and noise and disruption when you are doing the work of the Creator, that's it. You got to be able to identify. So like he and his son, when they started doing that, I got you, caught you. I know who you are immediately. They don't do it anymore. They haven't done it for like the past month. But I never said anything to him. I just never replied, but I didn't have to say anything, because once it came into my awareness of whose seed they were, then my overflow began to resolve the issue. So in the spirit world, the overflow of my energy and my force and my aura was now empowered with the new intelligence of, I see you, and it went to now defend or maybe even attack that which was seeking to disrupt me from doing my Father's work. All right, just a small example for you. All right, with that, thank you so much. I want to thank all you supporters for coming through. All of you new subscribers, we got a batch of new subscribers. Keep on coming, keep on sharing. And like I always say, share these ideas. You know, I know that some of the things you may hear me teach, it may not. Someone told me that the other night. They were like, you just keep me scratching my head all the time. And I said, that's a good thing. That means you're thinking, you know, that's a good thing. But don't expect me to reinforce everything that your teacher or your pastor or your Baba has said to you. I wasn't put on the earth to be that, you know. So there are things that you're going to hear from me that you've probably never heard before, because that's what the Creator has decided that I'm supposed to carry, you know. So, you know, share these things with people. Hey, man, I heard this guy said this. What do you think of this? Or that. I'm not here to debate, you know, just to be clear. I don't waste my time with debates. People have told me that before, like, oh, you should debate this one debate. For what? I don't waste my time with debates. I'll deliberate truth, but debates are just for people who are spouting opinion. You know, everything that I share with you is right and exact. So there's no debate. Now we could talk about how we're going to implement. We could do that all day, but I don't debate. You know, so anyone who's thinking to jump in and be like, well, I want to talk to you about this. No, not happening. You know, you can forget that. It's not happening. All right. We're not at that time period right now. We're at a time period where we got to wake people up. We got to resurrect them, and we have to heal. And we don't have time to be yip yapping. You know, I give you insights once it's strong, and then I get back to work. You know, so this is about all the yip yap you're going to get from me, in conjunction to what I give you in books and so forth and so on, which you can always find. People always say, "We're going to find your books, Chief." Same place in the world that you find every single other book, Amazon. But you can also go on like the ANU Life Global Ministry site, ANU Life Global.org. It's always on the bottom of these videos, and also inside of the description. If you want to contribute, if you want to donate, if you want to join, whoop-de-wah, it's always right there in the description. All right. So thank you so much. This has been a beautiful experience. Strengthen those auras and cultivate your ability to distance heal. I want to start feeling some positive rays hitting my aura. My aura is pretty big. So I'll know if you're working on it. I'll know if you're working on it. I'll feel it. No matter where you're at, I'll feel it. So put that work in. It's critical, because when you transition, you still want your aura as an ancestor to be able to heal and transmit to those who are still here on earth. You want them to be able to easily reach you, and for you to be able to easily assist. You also want to start to explore your home that the Messiah has went to prepare for you. And you can do that when you shift your aura beyond the three-dimensional reality. You can start to look at what Shemayim might be, just like, Ezekiel did, Enoch. All right. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I thank you for allowing me to share with you all. All right. Until next time. Shalom Aleichem.